Well, I don't know how it happened, but somehow it's 2025.
It's ridiculous.
We are back at it. As you can see, I am thrilled to have one of my favorite guests with me today, Mr. Dan Gjeldum, the chief of awesomeness of everything possible in mortgage lending. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we've got big things to discuss today, like huge, right? Today we are getting into it. We are going to do the 2024 Chicago Home Partner Market Report. Dun, dun, dun. I know. This is something that you've been very excited about. I've been very excited about. Our viewers are stoked about. What does this mean for us today? Today, we are going to look back on the past year. We are going to bring up our predictions from the beginning of the year. We're going to score ourselves. I don't know how we did. And then at the end, we are going to put forth some of our predictions for the next year.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's been an interesting year, and we're definitely looking forward to 2025.
Interesting is such a polite word choice. I really appreciate that because I had a couple of words going through my head, but I don't know if they were quite rated for this show. So first and foremost, 2025, it is a quarter century from Y2K, as we were just talking about. Yeah, Dan, I'm going to put you on the spot. Where were you New Year's Y2K, 1999 to 2000?
I was most likely in Lincoln Park somewhere. Single, hanging out with buddies, wondering what was going to happen at 12:01.
Wow.
And nothing happened.
Okay, so I can tell you exactly where I was. I was living down in Miami, South Beach to be exact. I had a new puppy that I had gotten for Christmas, my first boxer ever, Belmont. And I remember I was living on one of the intercoastals and they were afraid that you weren't going to be able to get home. So I had to bring my puppy with me to stay at a friend's house because everyone thought there was going to be problems with the streets, the ATMs, everything was going to shut down. And then I went out clubbing all night and the rest is history. Luckily, nothing shut down. The puppy was fine. Belmont, he was my heart dog. And we're here to talk about it today. But gosh, what a long time ago.
Yeah, it was weird. Everybody thought the world was going to stop.
The world was going to stop.
Nothing was going to work anymore.
Well, the life lesson in that is that we somehow always find a way to keep going. Okay, I'm going to dive into it. As I said, at the beginning of last year, we put together our predictions. Now, I'm excited to have Dan chime in on this. He's not as much on the spot as I am. I was the one that kind of did all the predictions. He's coming in because we wanted to give you two different aspects of it, right? The real estate side and the lending side. Obviously, they go hand in hand together, but we have a little bit of a different viewpoint on things. So he's going to help me in putting myself on the chopping block and see how I did. When we talk about these predictions, we are talking first and foremost about Chicago. Secondarily, we are talking about the areas that we do the majority of our business in. Easiest way to think about that is from South Loop up to Rogers Park, probably about as far west as Edison Park. Those are going to be the areas. Now, yes, if you just heard all those areas, you're going to have very diverse markets in there. You're going to have single families. You're going to have condos. You're going to have townhomes. You're going to have multi-units. You're going to have high rises. You're going to have walk-ups and everything in between. This is not specific to somebody's house. This is a generalization. Okay, now to get back into it. Prices. This is what everyone always wants to see. At the beginning of last year, my thought process on pricing was that pricing should increase in 2024. That was something that was really based on this ongoing problem that we've had of inventory. We haven't had enough homes to sell people, combined with a lot of other issues, but that in itself should have led us to higher price points. Those that are homeowners, I think, are going to be very happy with the results. Those who are not homeowners, who are trying to be homeowners, are probably going to be a little frustrated. Dan,
as we saw with our clients that purchased in the first half, kind of Q1 last year, when it got around to being able to refinance, they saw a notable appreciation with their values, right? And that's kind of what we spoke about. We kind of speak about it every, like Q4, Q1, right? It's people that want to wait typically pay for it in the end, right? They're worried about rates, but the value of the house going up is what's going to hit you more than a little bit of a rate increase.
So we saw on average last year in all of those different types of properties in all of those areas, we saw an 8.7% increase. That's huge. That's huge for our markets. Now, once again, that's not every home out there, but the market in general took a giant step forward. Now, that step, as we've talked about, just like you said, twofold. Number one, we don't have enough homes to sell people. But it's such a good learning piece for our clients, right? We have that conversation all the time. Those that are kind of sitting on the fence, waiting, not wanting to pay a premium, not wanting to get competitive, not wanting to pay the interest rates, the market is increasing at that point in time. So even if things slow down a little bit, the numbers are really not as favorable to them.
Yeah, I think, and it's the market passes you by, right? I mean, if you wait for whatever reason is, sometimes you have to wait,
Absolutely.
right? It might be a school thing where kids need to be out of school
100%.
before you do something. But if you don't have that and you just simply want to wait to see where the market goes, I mean, Chicago's a fast moving city, right? It's gonna move, and
We like to move and shake.
yeah, it's gonna move on you, right?
No,
And
it's so true. And I love what you said in there, because as anybody that's ever watched the show, it's not right for everybody to buy right now. And trust me, this time of year, we have so many conversations for what we call our move-up buyers who are going to sell something, who we actually project and target a slower time of year, right? There are some people that come to us right now that we're going to say, hey, let's reconnect in Q3. There are always strategies. There's always reasons. But if somebody is active and wanting to be in this market, at least in the foreseeable future, we know that because of the conditions, because of what we're in, that the likelihood of things going forward positive is quite high. And I say it to my clients all the time. The last thing I want to do is be talking in a year, and in a year that maybe you've saved up some more money and the interest rate has dropped, but we're still looking at the same house that we were a year ago, even though you're in a better financial position.
yeah, I think, it's people that want to do something and maybe want to push it off to the middle of the year. Just be flexible with it.
Yeah.
Because rates might drop, right? Who knows? Something might happen that causes you to all of a sudden start looking.
Yeah.
Right? Because I mean, how many times have somebody we talked to that they're at Q3, all of a sudden in Q1, they're like, holy cow, we found our place. We got to go. And we're closing in 20 days. Right?
We have a saying, and it's meant very compassionately, but we say that buyers are liars.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not meaning the bad thing. It's meaning that they have an idea and then something compels them off of it. And you're so right, is that we will have these conversations this time of year, and then we'll put together a timeline, and then somebody will say, hey, Amanda, I just popped in an open house and this place is it. Let's go now.
Yeah. You laugh. You want to say something to them, right? You want to say, oh, I thought you weren't buying until Q3. But it's, you're happy for them and they're ready to go. And it's just with us together. It's bang, 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 and let's do it.
So we're starting off the report card as an A+ student. Prices, we expected them to go up, and not only did they go up, I'd even say they went up probably even a little bit more than expected.
Yep.
Okay, the next one, the dreaded one, the one that I think we have not necessarily gotten right, maybe closer some years than others, but inventory. Inventory. That word has been the bane of my existence, of your existence, in the last 4.5 years. I think that's the timeline that I'm going to put it in. It's been a definite problem for us, and it definitely is going to remain a problem for us. Now, people always ask, how do we measure inventory? This is the thing that kind of gets them. Because it's not necessarily just how many homes are on the market. It's how many homes are on the market and how many people are actively trying to buy them. So we have a formula that we put together. So what we do is we call it our month supply. How many months supply do we have to service the current marketplace? Now, as a baseline, a normal, healthy market, which none of us know what it looks like anymore, is about 6 months.
Yep.
We have not touched 6 months in most of our markets in a really long time. Now, once again, I'm not sectioning out downtown or different areas, but it's something that we really haven't seen in a long time. Now, the prediction from Chicago Home Partner at the beginning of last year was that we thought that the inventory was going to stay relatively flat in terms of the month supply, but we thought that we might see a slight tick up in the actual homes coming to market. And what that would mean is that where there's a slight tick up in the homes on market, there'd also be a slight tick up with the people looking to buy them. We were not necessarily right. Our inventory and our month supply in market went down again. I mean, it's the kind of the moral of the story of what we've seen so far.
Yeah. And it's a tick.
A tick.
Right? You missed it by a week.
Yeah. So, technically we weren't right. Our month supply dropped a little bit. Our inventory also dropped a little bit. Nothing was extravagant, but we had an optimistic hope that maybe we'd have a flat month supply and a little bit more inventory. Everything was down a little bit more. Dan, as you said, it's not a significant amount, but still it's not moving in the direction that we hoped.
Yeah. And and we'll see what happens. I mean, you'll find out later what that thought is on what's going to happen. And I think it's a national thing too.
Sure.
Right. And it's been an inventory problem since before COVID. I mean, in 2019, there was an inventory problem, and then COVID happened, and then there was no inventory. Right. And it's because it's a different world. Yeah. Right. Rates were super low, then rates started going up, and then.
Well, I think if we look back on the last year, there were so many things that challenged people. Right. We still have, what we call the golden handcuffs. We still have those people that are stuck in their homes that so badly don't want to give up those interest rates, and they don't want to put their homes on the market, right? I know this is a big thing that we've talked a lot about with the baby boomers. They're very comfortable in that. They don't necessarily want to go into new situations. We have first-time buyers that need to move to a second home that, once again, they're probably the most sensitive to those numbers. I mean, we're seeing a lot of different things. And then on top of it, new construction is something that is just been fairly non-existent in our market, especially at certain levels, right? We're just not getting new construction. We're just not getting the inventory for a variety of reasons. Obviously, we'll touch a little bit on that when we kind of jump into what are we expecting for the next year. But if we look back on last year, we have that. Then all of a sudden throw in the election, which was just a little bit of a whirlwind. We saw a lot of mixed results with that. Right. Some expected, some not. It's the ongoing sentiment. It's the ongoing story. We need more homes.
Yeah. And I think eventually it'll turn, right? And I think that you mentioned the golden handcuffs piece.
Yeah.
We're seeing, because I do stuff obviously around the country.
Yeah.
And there are more and more people that are kind of over that.
Yeah.
The golden handcuffs because they've had a kid or they have a new job, right? And it's those kinds of things that the more steady the rate world gets, the more willing people are going to be putting their houses on the market, which is great for everybody.
Well, I think they're just getting more understanding and comfortable in the rate conversation, right? We're getting ourselves more and more removed from those interest rates that people for some reason thought were the norm, but people like you and I know, a 3% interest rate was only happening because our world was at a devastating place.
Once.
Well, exactly.
They've happened once.
But for some reason, we walked away from that going, this is the new norm. Now we're distancing ourselves from that enough that people realize that the 5 to 7% range is quite attractive and quite good.
Yeah, and it used to be more of an, like when you talk to people who want to move, it was almost like an angry discussion. Like, I'm not giving up 3.5.
Right.
Right. And now it's like, when I talk to people, I said, hey, by the way, the numbers don't have the same shape as they did back then. Right. Some of them might,
neither do I
some
sometimes.
of them, some of them might be crooked. Right. But yeah, it's not going to look the same.
Yeah.
And you just have to accept it. And people, when you kind of break the ice that way, they're like, yeah, we get it. Like, it is what it is. Right. But we have to move.
It's like my waistline after the holiday season.
Everybody's.
It's when we pull out the elastic pants. So essentially, we weren't off by much on that. We thought it was going to be relatively flat with a slight uptick in homes. It was a little bit the opposite. It was slightly down, slight downtick in homes. We're going to chalk that up. I'm going to give myself a C+ on that. How about that?
I'll give you a B minus.
You're so good to me, Dan. That's why we keep bringing you back. Now we're going to jump into your world, your house a little bit. Interest rates. At the beginning of last year, we said that interest rates should decrease slightly throughout the year and end hopefully in the low 6s. We were doing so well on that prediction, and then we weren't.
Yep. We look great. I mean, and it's funny, if you golf, they always say that 18 holes might be too long, like 12's about right. So in the rate world, rates got to their bottom in September. So if the year would have stopped in September, we would have hit the home run.
Nailed it in September.
Would have totally hit the home run. But yeah, there's a ton of factors, right? And leading into September, it was like, all right, the Fed's going to cut rates, right? They cut in September, but some people think they cut too much because they cut a half of a point when they cut a quarter of a point. So that kind of switched the markets and said, hold on a second, maybe we rallied too much. And then we saw them creep up from then. One thing to remember when we talk about the Fed cutting rates, because this is always I had this conversation yesterday. People don't understand that when the Fed cuts rates, they don't cut mortgage rates. They cut the Fed funds rate. They cut the rate at which banks borrow money from the Fed.
Yes.
That translates into home equity loans because prime rate is what home equity loans are based upon, which is 3% over Fed funds rate. It funnels into car loans, to credit cards, things like that. The Fed does not impact mortgage rates. No matter what people think, it's not the case.
Yes.
Directionally, it impacts mortgage rates, but the Fed does not do it. They don't, when they lower by a half, rates didn't lower by a half. So that's one of the things to just keep in mind, that we want to know what the Fed is doing, but what they specifically do has no impact on rates.
No, that's a great point, because I think you and I have so many conversations where we get the call and said, hey, the Fed just cut rates. What did my interest rate do? Right? There's going to be an impact, but it's not necessarily the way that people think. And sometimes it can even have a little bit of an adverse reaction.
It always goes the other way. When the Fed cuts rates, mortgage rates on that day go up.
Yep.
When the Fed raises rates, mortgage rates on that day go down. I almost
that was a great insider tip for anybody that's listening.
It's like 95% accurate where that's happened. Very rarely has the Fed direction mirrored mortgage rates.
So, and just to go back to some of our previous conversations, right, that September rate cut, we had talked about the fact that we thought specifically because it was an election year that we expected to see those rates go down.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they did. So that part we were spot on. It was just from what happened from September on, that's where we saw things go a little goofy. And I think you, if anyone, can talk to the point where it felt like the rates this year were a little bit of a roller coaster ride. I got sick to my stomach at certain points.
Yes, it was quite rough. I mean, but that, and it's funny too, because as we get into this, you can see it in the trends of what happened with homes under contract and things like that. They did follow the rates, right? And it's funny too. So one of the things to think of when we talk about rates and what's going to happen, if you think of mortgage rates like a stock, if you're buying a company's stock, you have an idea that they're going to do something in the future, right? If you buy thinking the stock's going to go up, they're going to have a great year. If you think it's going to, you short it and it's going to go down. Same thing happens with rates. That's why they rallied so much leading into September, was because they're like, all right, the Fed's going to cut rates and they're going to do it 1 or 2 or 3 more times. And it's, all of that. We can see this in Fed funds futures. The future trading world actually will, and I'm stammering a little bit because it's numbers are numbers, but going into like the December cut, people thought in November, the chances of another cut after the November cut was like 25%. And then more and more economic reports came in. Then it went to 60, then it went to 70, right? And, pre that cut the week before, it was like 90% chance of that cut happening. So it's things like that drive interest rates. So it's really smart to talk to someone in the mortgage world that has a pulse on it, because there's a lot of people who know nothing. You
use the line all the time that those things are getting priced in already. So when we're leading up, we've talked about this so many times, when we're leading up to something like that, you have so much inside scoop on it now that you can say, hey, that's already pricing into our rates. We're already seeing the expectation of them going down, so that when that actually happens, we don't see it. It's that optimism or that negative aspect that can really impact the rates more than, like you said, the actual rate cut.
Yes.
So I think that's a great takeaway. All in all, our rates did decrease a little bit. We were hoping to see them in the lower 6s by the end of the year. We hit that point in Q3.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we bounced back up a little bit. So we're ending a little bit higher than we thought, but it's still lower than where we were last year. And one of the conversations that I had so many times this year was kind of thinking back to 2023. There was a point in Q3 where we locked in our highest person at 8.25.
Yes.
Like from 8.25 to the high 6s even, like that's a major step in the right direction.
Yeah, and it was in that point, it was a hurry up and buy before they hit 9.
Right.
Like that's what the market was thinking, right? Because nobody had any idea. And what I would add to this too is when we talk about these rates, they're the general conforming interest rate, right? Which is any loan, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. There's jumbo loans that tend to be a little bit lower, but then for the first-time buyers, there's FHA loans, which are a half a point lower than the rates we're talking about. There's VA loans for the veterans out there. They're even more than a half a point lower, right? So there's a bunch of, and first-time homebuyer programs are lower, right? So when we talk about the average market, much like when we talk about the average sales price, right? It's single families, condos, all of that. Mortgage rates are the same thing, but we're carving out one specific section in
We've got a lot of cardinal sins going on right now with how we're talking about generalizations in general. from that perspective. No, but we are doing things that we typically wouldn't to give people the big picture.
Yep.
Though I always put the disclosure on the side note where Dan has so many great products. We have to also understand that certain products are more challenging in certain markets, especially Chicago has such a large condo market, right? The VA products, the FHA products, those are ones that just are a little bit more challenging for us to work through, which is frustrating, of course, but part of the landscape that we navigate.
Yep. And we can navigate you through it.
Okay, so I'm going to give myself a B on that last one, I think. That's when you say, I'm going to give you a B plus, Amanda.
I'm going to give you a B plus, Amanda. I take orders well.
I'm just trying to make myself feel better as I go into some of these.
No, you did. I mean, you really did well. The fact that they went down, that's a win.
Winning.
Yes.
Well, they were so high, it was hard to get that one that wrong, right? Number of home sales. This is something that is, these are also linked together at the end of the day. And I think that's where it's either we really do well or we really don't. And the inventory has been the kick in the gut. But the number of home sales, kind of comparing how many homes are selling year over year. Now, my prediction was that this would remain flat. I had a little asterisk on this one that wasn't overly fair, though, as I said that if we saw an increase in inventory, this could go up. But my prediction was that it was going to remain flat. And this one, I'd like to say, I feel like I nailed it.
It's really close
what
to
he said.
Almost perfect.
We were off by 0.29%, not 2.9%, 0.29%. It was a fraction of the number of homes. It was I'm trying to figure out our data here. We're less than 40 homes
you're
difference
38
year over year.
Homes.
Your math is a little bit better than mine.
38 homes. I do it every day. Usually with a calculator though. But 38 homes. There's more than 13,000 homes and you got it right there.
Right. Well, that's the good news is that I did right on that. The bad news is that we didn't see an increase because we didn't see the increase in the inventory and so on and so forth. But it was a little bit in terms of the expectation that we know that this is our struggle, right? We know that these numbers are down from where they need to be, where we want them to be. But the reality is until we can get more products on the market, these numbers are gonna see that.
Yeah.
So I'm giving myself an A on that one.
I would agree.
Winning. Okay, the next one that we have up here is going to be the days on market. What we expected to happen with our days on market, the day from the day a home is listed to the day it goes under contract, not the day it closes, but the day it goes under contract. We were previously at the very low number of 33 days on market. Now, once again, I went out on that limb and I predicted that I thought that this number was going to stay pretty consistent year over year. And certainly we did. We dropped slightly. So if I'm going to give myself a negative tick, we dropped down to 31 days on the market year over year. That's a difference of 2 days, which once again, in the grand scope of things, I'm going to say is a pretty accurate prediction. And once again, I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over again. Not enough homes, competitive market, homes don't stay on the market. The question that I get all the time from my clients is, especially the sellers, how long should we expect the home to be on the market? My answer, hands down, no matter what time of year we're in, if we're on the market for longer than 30 days with most products, not all products, but if we're on the market for longer than 30 days, there's something that we're not doing right. The price, the marketing, who we're getting in front of, something is not where we need it to be because the reality is the market is moving relatively quickly.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because we always, when we work on the buy side together, I'll look at some of the listings. It's like, this has been on the market for a while. But typically, it's by inexperienced agents who throw out a price because the seller asks them to throw out a price that's way too high.
Yep.
It's from agents who don't know the market, right? Maybe like a suburban agent.
Yep.
Not to say that you can't cross the city and suburb line, but oftentimes the ones that stay on the market a little bit longer, right? It's the people who have some sort of lack of knowledge on the sell side. But one thing that I'm curious about, because I know other people out there are going to be curious about, what about the private market? Where does the private market fall into days on the market? How are those measured?
It's private. No. So technically what happens on the private network stays in the private network. It's just like Las Vegas. That doesn't come into play when we look at days on market. And that's the beauty of it, especially this time of year. This time of year, we might put things on there to kind of say, hey, if somebody really needs to buy a house, it's there. But we're not going to do anything that says that's not going to come forward in our market time.
Okay.
So that's the beauty of it. Now, once again, can it be a little bit misleading when we're looking at the data? of course, because technically, as long as you are working with some level of agency that knows what they're doing, they should be able to find homes on the private market. It's the general public that might not have access to them. But that market timeline doesn't impact our days on market when we look at it at the end. But it's a great, great question. Now, some of those homes will sell in the private network, and they don't even become part of the data at the end of the day, right?
They just
get washed. Now, my favorite thing is, especially in spring market, I could tell a little bit of a funny story about you and I, is that because the market with our buyers is so competitive, it's like you and I have a check-in at Friday at like 3:00 and says, okay, what came on the market? What are you going to see this weekend? Who needs pre-approvals? What do we have ready to go? I mean, my favorite thing is when I'm representing the listing and somebody says to me, oh, well, I'm going to get you a pre-approval on Monday. If you're a loan officer during spring market in Chicago and you're not working over the weekends, I'm sorry, I respect your personal time. But the reality is you're losing deals left and right.
Yeah. I mean, that's where, I'm not around every weekend during the spring market. I have family stuff and all of that, but the team is ready to go.
Everybody's ready to go.
And it's via text, a lot via text. Tell the client, hey, text me whatever you need, right? I'll loop in my teammates to those texts, right? Because we're ready to go and we're fired up to do it just because it is as you mentioned too, like with the private, there's so many things that are out there that show up on the private and all of a sudden, like 2 days later, it's like, we're going to see a place. I'm like, I can't find it online. Like, I don't know. Tell me, can you send me what you have? Like, all of those things. But yeah, it's big because people do, like going back to the private, people hold stuff.
Yep.
And I know agents out in the burbs who they have a schedule of all their sellers and they're going to release X this week, X next week.
100%.
Right?
There are days that go into the pocket listings. There are days that go into the MLS. Like there is a strategy behind everything.
Yeah. And it's all much like, most things in life, it's who you know.
Yeah.
Right. And you're fantastic at that.
Okay, so days on market, we said it was going to be flat. It was down 2 days. Based on the fact that we have 365 days in the year, off 2 days, I'm going to give myself an A- on that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with that. Probably move it up to the A because again, the private market's gotten so big that
that number could change it.
Yes.
Okay, so our last one, and right now I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling like I did pretty good. Now I was a straight A student in school, so anything outside of an A kind of gives me a little bit of high blood pressure. But I'm feeling pretty good with where we're at, especially considering what happened in the year. The last one is always, in my opinion, one of the hardest ones to predict, especially knowing that we were coming into an election year. So we talk about consumer confidence, right? The consumer confidence index, this is where we kind of get our numbers. We went back and at the beginning of the year, we said with so many things coming down the pipeline, we actually thought confidence was going to remain relatively flat. And this is the one. If I flunked on anything, this was it. Consumer confidence skyrocketed this year, which is kind of an amazing thing to think about, especially it seemed to really get momentum and started doing well before the election. And that's something that typically we don't see in the past. We saw that the consumer confidence rose 15% in 2024.
Yeah.
So this one?
But yeah, you missed it, but it's a good miss.
It's a good miss,
right?
Yes.
It's the overall sentiment. It's a great miss, right? Consumer confidence, it measures the stock market, which is at all-time highs.
Yep.
It measures the labor market, right? Which has remained pretty nice.
Yep.
So it measures all of like how people are feeling.
Unemployment, all those.
How they're feeling about their business, right? If they are a business owner, right? So those things it's a good thing that consumer confidence went up.
No, I love that perspective because you are right. It is a much better thing. And I think the one thing, if we had a little bit of a shock, was how bullish the stock market was this year, right? I don't think anybody was going to predict the strength of that market and kind of the sentiment behind it, especially in a year of uncertainty.
Yeah, seemingly record after record after record.
I'd like a year like that. Everything that I do is just daily breaking records.
Yes, I'd like rates to go back to lower, 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 lower.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. Consumer confidence, I failed on that one, but as Dan said, we failed in a really beneficial way for the state of the country. So that's one that I'm okay to fail on.
Yeah, but you got a smiley face on the paper, right? Like your teacher said, great effort.
Great
effort. You missed it. Great effort. Smiley face.
That blood
check
pressure
mark,
starting to go up again.
Maybe a star next to it, right? Like stickers on it.
Stickers. Oh my God, that feels very, very today. If you're not first, you're last.
Ricky Bobby.
In the words of Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you're last. At least I nailed the real estate stuff, so it makes me have a little bit more confidence in myself. I think the year was pretty much on point. I think the big takeaway where it was different is that rather than being a kind of a direct point to where we went, I think that the differences came in the fact that it felt like a little bit of a roller coaster ride, or maybe a big roller coaster
Yeah, but
ride.
I mean, overall, your report card,
Yep.
everyone's Chicago Home Partner Confidence Index should be pretty good.
Like that.
Yeah, just thought of it.
That's why we keep them around. Okay, now we're going to transition to the stuff that most people, they're like, last year's behind us. That's fine. We need to step forward into the future. What the heck is happening next? This is where I pull out my crystal ball, I dust it off, and we look into the future. How's your crystal ball feeling right now, Dan?
Dust it off.
I guess that's better than dusty.
Exactly.
Okay, so overall, to sum it up, 2024 in a nutshell. Pricing went up. Inventory flat to slightly down. Interest rates decreased a itty bitty bit, but not as much as we wanted to. Home sales almost nailed it in terms of being perfectly flat year over year. Our days on market were almost the same as well. Consumer confidence was the real winner in that it went up. Not a bad year.
Not a bad year.
So now we're putting ourselves on the chopping block. We're going to talk about what we expect for the next year. We're going to put our predictions out there. And then 1 year from now, we're going to come back and we're going to grade ourselves. This is accountability, right? New Year's, we're holding ourselves accountable. I haven't broken any of my New Year's resolutions yet. We're not that far into it, but yet. Dan, have you broken any New Year's resolutions yet?
None yet.
Okay, so first and foremost, what everyone is so curious about, what is going to happen to pricing in 2025? Dan, what say you?
My vote is up, right? I think prices are going to go up, and there's a lot to do with it, right? From the mortgage person, rates stay steady, even if they bounce a little bit, right? Like if it's more of a slopes versus cliffs, we're going to see prices go up.
No, I think you're 100%. And I think that there's so much invested in that. I think, right, if interest rates perform well, we have a lot of people that have, in my opinion, been getting not so good advice and waiting, but they're going to jump into the market. We're still going to have limited inventory. That's going to push the pricing up. We have to understand that the election is behind us, so that any pause from that, any lack of confidence or whatever it is, that's going to be behind us. And whatever your political preference is, most people know mine, but we're not going down that road right now. Whatever your political preference is, we tend to see that real estate performs well the year after an election. In the last 11 elections, real estate performed positively in 10 of them. 10 out of 11. That's a huge number. And once again, whether you like him or hate him, insert bubble here, whether you like him or hate him, Trump is a real estate guy. Trump is a real estate guy, and he likes to borrow money. And he also likes to be popular. You add all those things together, that's a sector that he's done well in. I think that there's going to be support in that. Now, I think some of the people will question, how will this tariff aspect really implement anything? If those get implemented, what are we going to see from a real estate perspective? Dan, do you think there's going to be any upfront pushback on that?
Yeah, if tariffs are implemented from where they're, on whom they're implemented, right? If the administration puts tariffs on Canada.
Yeah, lumber.
What I think it's something like 70% of our lumber comes from Canada, right? So there you go. Your cost to build, right? Skyrockets. Your cost to rehab skyrockets. Right. So
these are not costs that developers are just going to absorb.
Correct. Yeah, nothing. No developer will ever absorb anything. But when the administration comes in, if they do everything they say they want to do, it'll have a devastating effect in our world, right? So being a real estate guy, and he's putting people into place that are they understand the market more than just throwing out, we're going to tariff everybody. Yeah. I think it's going to be the tariff piece of it's going to be a little muted. Yep. Right. So yes, if it goes in, prices will skyrocket for those kinds of things. But if they don't, he could also decide, or the administration can also decide, we're not going to do any of this. Of course. Right. Let's come to an agreement on something, blah, blah, blah.
I think the other thing that will be interesting for us to watch is how the decoupling of the commissions from the NAR settlement have impact on our pricing. Now, what we've seen thus far, right? We're 4 or 5 months into this now, because it started technically before it really started. is that we're seeing very little impact on it, just increased discussions. But I know I have a lot of my cash investors that we're doing some pretty creative things on, so that realistically, we could see that kind of impede our results at the end of the year. That's a little bit of, in my mind, it's a little bit of a question mark of how this goes into place.
Yeah. And I think if we go back to like the administration piece, the deportation piece will have a number one, GDP will be impacted, right, on a grand scheme. But in real estate, labor costs are going to skyrocket too, right? Huge. So there's, again, just because they say they're going to do things doesn't mean at the end of the day that they're really going to do what they say that they're going to do. Much like
that would be a novel concept.
Go figure, it's politics.
Right. Okay, so we both agree that a year from now, we will be sitting here, and that pricing, we will talk about it in a positive sense, that it will have gone up.
Yes.
Okay, this one, inventory. I feel like it's been a little bit on repeat. Like we've got a vinyl record going, and there's a glitch. We keep scratching the record and going back and back and back. I'm going to go out there to say that inventory a year from now, because of all of the things that we've talked about and so much more, will remain relatively flat. But I'm going to inject some optimism in it. I'm going to say that we have a possible uptick, right? I don't know if I truly believe that, but I'm putting it into the universe because the universe needs it. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think that inventory will increase because, again, as we have touched on, the rate environment, people are used to it.
Yeah.
Right? They know we're not going back to 3s and 4s. If we hit a 5, that's great, right? But I think that those people that are locked down or whatever, golden handcuffs, whatever the term you want, they're going to be okay with getting rid of something that starts with a 3 and moving to a 6.
Yeah, I think, the word that I use so much with it is that we're normalizing it.
Right.
Right? The 3%, even the 4%, there was never anything normal about it.
And those people who were at those low rates, they also purchased at a time when rates or when prices were whatever, and prices have only gone up. Yeah. So they're going to kind of weigh it and say, well, I'm okay paying more in my rate because I've made so much money on my house.
That's a great perspective and a great way to look at it. But no, I think that it's, the big questions will be, are there any policies that are put into place with regards to lending money? Kind of what happens in the rate world. I think consumer confidence is, as we saw, is high. And I think that's something that can continue to push some of these aspects and kind of show some. And that's where my optimism comes in from this perspective, is expecting a little bit more inventory to get up as we normalize this. I hate to even use the C word on this show, this post-COVID world, not the other C word. I don't know what you guys were thinking about. I think the other thing to take a look at, and this will be interesting to see, is since we're going down this huge political mess right now, just if there's anything that could be done to make building a little bit easier in Chicago. We've had such an ordeal, in the past years. Our builders are struggling so much to actually get new inventory out there. It's been created to be such a process that we've seen a lot of our great builders actually pack up and leave, go elsewhere, saying, "Hey, Chicago, peace. I love you, but I don't want to navigate this world anymore."
Yeah.
And we need them.
While it's we're talking in a neighborhoods, right? But like when we go back to policy, if Trump does loosen things up in the regulation world,
yes,
right? He's saying, and granted, this isn't us here, but if he opens up federal land to let home builders, give us more homes that we desperately need around the country, that kind of stuff helps, right? That inventory nationally, right, would go up, but those kinds of things, it all funnels down, right? If he deregulates some stuff in that space, as well as in the the rules and regulations about stuff, I think it's gonna increase.
From your lips to whose ears.
It makes if there's more inventory, there's more homes to buy. There's less bidding wars.
It's a win for everybody.
It's way less stressful on buyers.
No, it's to when we get to a point where we actually have inventory again, which, as I've said many times, I think that's a longer term perspective. I think we're looking 3 to 5 years out. But I'm hoping that we can inch our way there a little bit. So once again, prediction is inventory is going to remain relatively flat year over year. There's a couple of wild cards in there that could really make us wrong in this, but that our hope is that we see a slight uptick by the end of the year. So Dan, now this is your baby, your world. What do we think rates are going to do in 2025?
The pre-college Dan would say, I'm going to ace this. The college Dan says, I'm going to be close. But I think we're range.
What about today? I know that was just a couple of years ago, but what about today?
We're gonna get a B or higher for this one. rates are going to stay range bound, right? There's nothing on the horizon. Granted, we don't know if there's another COVID coming, right? Things like that, but
Sure.
nothing on the horizon that's going to make rates go low, like dive. And there's seemingly nothing that's going to make rates go up unless
we're not allowed to say that there's seemingly nothing in this post-COVID world because we've been through a lot.
True. But yeah, I think on the low end, maybe dip it into the fives, and we like high fives.
You heard it here first. I heard the 5 word.
High fives might mean instead of 6, we're selling 5.99.
100%.
But somewhere there, right? So toggling the 5% line or 6% line. Yes, we could see them bump up, right? And shoot over 7 for a second, but then come back down. So
Sure.
Yes, there are models out there that say we might touch 7 again, but more likely it's going to be range bound, like high 5s to mid 6s, averaging across the line.
I think I'm pretty in line with you because, of course, you're one of my trusted resources. Because if we're not, I think I have a little bit of a different perspective on it, though, in the sense that I hope one of the two. I think that we're going to see a little less volatility this year. I think that rates throughout the first half of the year are going to remain more stable. None of the peaks or valleys. I don't personally think that they're going to go down much in the first half of the year. I think that the momentum will hopefully be in the second half of the year that we start to see some reductions to get it to a better place at the end of the year. But I personally feel like that's going to be a not right up front. So once again, we talk about those people that are waiting for that. First of all, not good advice. But I think that it's something that I think will end better than we're starting. But I think that in the first half of the year, we're going to be relatively stable on that. Obviously, there's a lot of wild cards of what would hit that. And I think that's the one thing to note. This sector, this prediction is so based on what the crap is happening in the world. And if the last few years have taught us anything, we've been through 2 international wars, a heck of an election. We've had a mayoral election here. We've had so many different things pelting us from different directions that have impacted our economy, impacted our rates, that's where it kind of feels like someday I'm putting on a bulletproof vest and I'm just kind of navigating through whatever is going to come our way.
Yeah. And, and that's one thing that people I don't say don't ever. A lot of people don't think of what happens outside of the world, like the U.S., right? But geopolitical events, it's a big thing.
Huge.
Right? Because again, at the end of the day, we're the most stable economy on the planet. So when things go bad in the world, people buy our bonds, which makes our rates go down.
Yep.
Things like that, nobody can predict them, but
Nope.
Those are things that have impacts. What I would say, and I always tell people, don't try to time the market.
Right.
Don't, trying to get to the bottom on the rate side is catching a falling knife. It's the only, you know what I mean? It's impossible to do.
Right.
And you can always refinance. In theory, things can happen where you can't. You lose a job, you can't refinance. But if the status quo stays and rates go down, then you refinance, right? But again, it's getting into that house. Think of the timing is the purchase side, not the rate side. Rates are what they are.
Right.
Right. So to people thinking about what to do, focus on the home.
That's the hard part.
Yeah. The loan's a big deal, but
some of the best advice that I've heard you give time and time again is, especially once somebody finds the home and you've got the time between contract and closing, is that locking in creates a ceiling for the rates, right? We've been in a volatile market, so locking in creates a ceiling for the rates and helps people to be successful longer. But just to wrap it up, I think both of us agree that hopefully a year from now, we're looking at numbers that are a bit on the lower side, a bit more favorable. I think we had a little bit of a thought process on how they're going to get there, but that hopefully by the end of the year, we're sitting here and people are very happy with what they're seeing.
Yes, and we get A's on our report card.
We're having no F's on the report card. Next up, we are going to jump into the home sales. Now, the home sales is a hard one to predict because it's so tied to the inventory. If we don't get more homes, we can't get more home sales. We both said that the inventory should remain relatively flat. We might see a slight uptick in it, but because of that, we tend to see that it should be flat. I'm going to go out there though, because I think there's a few things on the horizon. I think home sales overall will go up slightly, even if we don't see more inventory, right? And it's hard to always put that thought process together. We have, as we've talked a lot about, people have gotten a little numb to the interest rate. People need to move. We've had a lot of people stuck by themselves, not stuck like housing crisis,
right,
but stuck by themselves in their houses. So they need to move. We have consumers that are just starting to say, hey, enough's enough. We have a lot of equity. We've got a lot of money in there. So I think that this will be the year that people say, enough's enough. I'm going to do it.
Yeah. People always have kids, right? So they have to move.
Making babies.
Right? People are making babies. They have to move. The employment market stays nice, right? People are getting promotions. They're getting raises. They might have to move, right? So they might move into the city or whatever the case may be. So those things are definitely, they're going to have an impact. And I think on the positive side.
I agree with you on that one. Very, very simple. Home sales will go up. It will be slight because once again, we need more inventory for it to make an aggressive jump. But I think that we're going to see a positive number there. Okay, I nailed days on market this year. I think I'm gonna nail it again. My prediction is going to be that once again we see a relatively flat market with regards to days on market. The time that a home is on the market from the time it lists to the time it goes under contract. We were only off by 2 days this past year. I'm going to say once again, just based on everything that we've talked about so far, we're going to see that. I know, Dan, in your world, some things that may impact it to be more positive is that you're getting more and more products that can shorten the mortgage process. What was the fastest loan that you closed in 20?
8 days. That's the fastest by law, technically, is 8 days.
8 days to get a mortgage done. We used to say like 30 was pushing it, now down to 8. That could have some impact as we go through and kind of see how this goes. But I'm going to say that we're going to see the days on market stays flat. Around 30 days is pretty aggressive to start with. And I'd be surprised if we dip below that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those, like, I'm always curious, and I don't know if we can measure this, but from contract to close, like what happens to that? Like how long is that average time?
The contract to close. That will be an interesting thing to see. We could definitely do it. The hardest thing about that is that there's a lot of personal reasons in that, right?
Exactly.
And especially in a competitive market, a lot of times we're pushing closings out or doing rent backs or those types of things.
Yeah, and I think, and two, there's also the how quickly can we get things done, right? So that, and the more competitive the market, that's something that if you can come in, at $5,000 higher, right? But you can close in, 2 weeks versus someone who wants to close in 30 days, or not even $5,000 higher, more $5,000 lower.
$5,000 lower.
$5,000 lower,
I'm thinking
right?
myself.
$5,000 lower.
Totally.
And
but
close
better
quickly,
terms.
better terms, non-contingent.
Set the seller up for success.
Right? Those kinds of things, that's what wins. And that's where the conversations with you, the conversations with me, especially how prepared they are.
Yeah.
Right?
Competitive markets make us dig deep into our arsenal of strategies and tools.
Yeah, I got a call yesterday from a listing agent who had a pre-approval from us. It was from September, and it had a rate that was 3/4 low. I mean, rates are higher, right? But it was an old pre-approval letter, and the agent called and he's like, "Hey, are you good with these terms?" I'm like,
"No."
What did you say for the rate?
Heck no.
I'm like, "No, that's not good." And they're like, "You haven't talked to the person?" And it was like a random, internet lead that had come across. The person had no idea that they had to actually update things, right? And the borrower, but they got mad at us.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you can't just throw a letter out there. Guess what? Agents check this stuff.
Right. Well, the good ones do at least.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay. So we both agree days on market should be fairly flat. It's an aggressive number now. It should stay aggressive.
Yep.
Okay. The last one, the one that I failed so badly on, but in the most positive way of falling on my face, consumer confidence. I'm going to say that consumer confidence will continue to go up in 2025. I don't think it'll be as dramatic as we saw in 2024. Clearly, I had no idea then, but I think it will go up. We tend to see, once again, no matter whether you support the president, you don't support the president, everybody knows my thought process on that, but we see that post-presidency years have a lot of optimism. They also have kind of a honeymoon period where things are happening from that perspective. So I think we're going to see that piece go. We also have to know that, once again, our stock markets, our unemployments, all of our labor stuff, everything has moved in a very positive direction. If we can keep some of the momentum, then I think that we're in a relatively good place, and I think the consumer confidence will mirror that a year from now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the only wild card is if what sort of policies put into place.
The only wild card is Trump 2.0.
Yes.
No, that's
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't.
No idea how to.
It wouldn't even. It wouldn't matter who it was, right? If it was
Well, let's be fair. It wouldn't matter who it was, but it's an extra large wild card right now.
Right. Just because the magnitude of things being spoken about.
It's the elephant in the room, so to say.
Yes.
Okay, so you heard it here first. We just put our predictions out there just to recap on them. We both agree that pricing is going to go up in 2025. Inventory should be relatively flat, but we're both speaking optimism and putting it out there in the world and thinking that we're going to see a slight uptick. We're going to see that our days on market stays relatively flat. Our number of sales, I'm thinking, is going to go up. I think Dan agreed with me on that. Interest rates, I jumped over there, your world. Interest rates we think are going to be way more stable this year, but that hopefully we see a downtick as we kind of navigate through this. But I wouldn't be sitting and waiting for it. And we both 100% agree consumer confidence is going to thrive in 2025.
I would. Yep. You nailed it.
Holy smokes, man. We did it. We just put it out there. Hope you guys all had a lot of great intel on here. I'm so curious to hear what other people think as well. Please leave some comments for us so that we can get back with any questions. Dan, wholeheartedly, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
It's always a pleasure. Until next time, Chicago.